It took a while before I decided to start work on building Deltarune Chapter 2 in Minecraft. As mentioned before, I had never actually gotten into that part of the game due to a fixation on Hades during the height of its popularity. But there was a draw to Chapter 2 I couldn't quite resist. The cyber world. A world formed from the distortion of the internet. A world unlike the previous one I built. A world more expansive than the previous one I built. I knew things would need to be fixed before going in there, and I was more than happy to do them. What I underestimated was how much I would be doing in there, and what it would mean for my perception of Deltarune. It's never too late to fall in love with the world. Your passions. Oh, hello. Sorry, I've been listening to the power rip of Field of Hopes and Dreams on loop as a form of procrastination. I bet you were thinking that first one was copy struck for that part, when actually it was the trailer, I assume, because I wasn't talking over it the whole time, so I could have substituted for actually listening to the piece. I hope you did listen to the pieces, they were linked below. Anyway, you're probably here for the project, so I'll start with the procrastination. Welcome back! As you can see, things are looking a lot more jovial here on the Deltarune map already. Since Chapter 1's video has become the second video on the channel to crack 10k, and the first one I'm actually proud of, I've taken some time to spruce things up in the areas I've done, making them a bit more presentable just in acknowledgement of the fact that this chapter is going to have a lot more eyes on it than the first. For that reason, I want to start by talking about the changes I'm making from the get-go, amendments to the first video just to get everyone up to speed on what I plan on doing differently in this chapter. Number 1. This video has been recorded and built using the same profile as the Hollow Knight world since I felt I could make it fit here despite Deltarune having a very different atmosphere to Hollow Knight. I felt the Ashen texture pack was faithful enough to default that I could pull off building with it here without giving an unintended fantasy effect to everything. Number 2, the biome coloring from Hometown that I used for the first video has mostly been removed in substitution for a more traditional old-growth birch forest, since I felt the first style kind of deviated from the intention of blending my reimaginings into the natural Minecraft landscape. I'd also like to note that all the texture packs I've used for videos thus far have had autumn birch leaves built in, or in Ashen's case had an extension that requires polytone, which I'm using now. So while the style of the trees mainly comes down to the texture pack, it's not required for full enjoyment. Number 3, the dark world we created in the last video was obsolete for Reason 1's purposes. If you flash back to the last video, you will know that the end format I chose made it a nightmare for shader packs. We'll get into programming after this, but I wanted to say if you played the map with shaders and this is how it turned out, I'm sorry, I will fix it in this video. Number 4, this is just a personal one, but I know Chris is canonically non-binary, there's like 50-something citations on the wiki about that. I know it shouldn't need to be said, and I wrote through my script after the last video and I don't think I've unconsciously mispronounced them, but I also don't want you to think that I'm one of those guys who scream pronouns whenever they see any sort of gender ambiguity in their video game. It's cool, I'm not one of them channels, even though I sound like I pretty much should be in that brosphere. So with that out of the way, by the time I had gained most of my confidence back in March after the events in the background of the last video, I started recording gameplay of what was my first ever playthrough of Deltarune Chapter 2. It took about 2 weeks. I had all necessary gameplay recordings together by the end of March, ready to start building in April. A playthrough which gave me just a few thoughts. Trust me, if you hated my cringe storytelling in the last video, I can tell you it only gets worse from here. I mean, while the last video was built on my feelings throughout the build process, this chapter will more so be based on my feelings throughout playing the game. While I do still worry that I talk about myself too much in that last video, I still believe that the context behind the project is still reflective on how it turns out. As we'll see later on, this is going to turn out a lot differently from the last video, because I knew that once I moved on to Chapter 2, this needed to be on Undertale levels of quality, or else I'll be a complete joke. So to start us on that road to that Undertale level of quality, we needed to fill in one of the biggest gaps from the last video. Once Chris brings the contents of the spare classroom into the closet, the Castle Town experiences a complete overhaul with various locations from Chapter 1 along with some new ones. Rosai's Castle is also included here along with its interior, a key part of the town that was missing from the Chapter 1 release due to me wanting to keep things within their chapters at a time. Or, as I mentioned in the video, I just wasn't ready to build a crazy castle yet. Luckily, I was in the castle building mood this time to do it, so let's not waste any more time yapping about building, and let's actually do it. I've been talking for like 5 minutes anyway, and we have a lot to get through. To streamline the traversal between worlds, the stairway in the closet was removed for a more traditional gateway to the dimensions from Chapter 1. And with that done, we could return to our Dark World dimension and start... Oh yeah, I need to readjust the data pack. I'm not going to go as deep into the specifics on the programming of the data packs this time, since it was mostly just duplicating what we already have and changing a few things, so this video's programming segment will mostly just be a tour of the project itself. First set of files were the dimension files. We went from 1 dimension to 4, I didn't want to erase what I made in the last video, and they all shared the same general format but with one difference, the dimension type. This leads to the second file and the biggest change I made, which was a custom dimension type exclusively for the Dark World. It acts as a kind of middle ground between some of the problems I mentioned in the last video of the set dimension types, so instead of relying on the set end format, I made my own dimension format featuring the land generation of the end, the ambient light of the nether, and the midnight sky of the overworld. The final files were the biome files, which were relatively unchanged from the last time. The main additions were the cyberworld biomes, which were mostly clones of each other but featured the same watercolor as used in the acid for my Hollow Knight world, acting as the cyberworld's acidic water. So overall, this is how Castletown looks in the new dimension formatting. Wait, I forgot to turn on the shaders, hold on. There we go. Now this is a world I can use shaders on. After redoing the entrance, I also redid the exit into the Dark World at the bottom of the mountain. And now that we have a more traditional entrance into Castletown, the time has come to destroy the Dark World because I hate it, I hate this piece. This wasn't a bit, I really did destroy last video's Dark World. Let me explain. My knowledge on how the Dark World works is admittedly limited, but whether the worlds created by the fountains are separate or on one large plane that allows I has to traverse across whenever another fountain is formed, the latter format would be unsustainable in the world's current state due to multiple factors, but mostly if you leave the center of the dimension you start getting end bounds, and I don't really have any intention of clearing them out. Meanwhile, this meant I could move the Dark Door from Chapter 1 to a more accurate position next to the training ground, which would then fill in that ugly gap from the last part that I kind of hated in the end. So that was fixed and all, but what of the actual buildings that come with the world? We have the short from Chapter 1 that could easily be pasted in from the Card Kingdom. There was also the cafe where you can view your recruits. I pretty much got all of them on my run in the gameplay footage. The top bakery had the smith from Chapter 1 and the lancer giving you a cookie. And finally, the dojo where you can replay battles, which I only used like once and it was after Chapter 3 was over. That basically sums up all we needed to do before the castle, which I decided to place above where we moved the door to. To start, I redecorated the main town centre by adding some grass and oak trees. These would come out more black and purple in the default texture pack, but they still looked fine here. After livening up the rest of the town, I decided to tackle the ugly excuse swap halfway to the Card Kingdom from the last video, and decided to turn it into the sound studio from the end of Chapter 2. I was tempted to make the original tunnel a secret area, but didn't exactly know what to do with it back then. But overall, I really liked how the studio turned out here, quite a flamboyant and innovative take on its original design in my opinion. The next part I moved on to was sculpting the upper layer of the town to house the Chapter 2 facilities, mostly collapsing some of the mountain to make a flat platform I could place all of them on. At the end, I structure blocked in the shop, since being a copy it was easiest to put in, don't judge me on that. After realising I couldn't fit all of the facilities on the platform, I built the cafe on the ground level. It ended up being a good choice since I doubt I would have been able to fit everything into a single coffee cup. Instead, I built it into the actual mountain and placed the coffee cup on top to act as a bonus exit out onto the top layer, so I guess you can say it still went to my conventions of keeping Chapter 2 stuff above everything else. The interior was kept quite modern, apart from the stairs exiting up out of the marshmallow, where the tables were placed in the corners going back to the main counter, with the outer edges being lined with lit up bushes. And once the rest of the primary lighting was in place, the interior ended up looking very good for what it was. Next, I flattened out an area for the top bakery, a place that would totally be a Greggs if it was British. The design was kept relatively faithful to the game, albeit with a wood texture and some supports for realism. This meant the interior was quite small to hold everything but the counter, so I relocated most of the seating to a grassy area outside and moved the doors to the side rather than the centre of the building. Lastly was the dojo, which I built into the mountain since I had a unique idea for that. The design of the dojo's interior would be a take on the battle system and its interface. I did a similar thing in the secret area of my Undertale world where for you know whose loom I added some of the battle buttons as command blocks. Here I designed the walls off of the general battle background and added each action button on the walls next to the dance floor, which was modelled off the battle layout. Okay, so now that the rest of the town is out of the way, we can finally move to what is essentially the first major landmark of the video, Lauzai's castle. Castle of His Royal Fluffiness Lauzai. Did I get a bit carried away there? Sorry. There wasn't much of reference for the exterior of the build. For Undertale's castle I could go off of the view from Waterfall, and Deltarune had some similar shots, including a tiny one in the town itself. The only thing I could use for this castle solidly was the opening cutscene, since that's the best reference I could get on what I could build from this. So let's get on with this car. A big remix already? We're only 10 minutes in, we've hit a good one. I guess we can expect a few this time around. Firstly, I cleared out the chasm the castle was meant to go in, flattening it to make way for a lake around the castle. Not really a moat because it mostly wrapped around the front, and depending on future versions I may develop it into something more moat-like. I painted Skulk on the floor and decorated it with sea pickles to get a waterfall-like glow effect for the dark water, and then developed the courtyard more to fall off at the lake, with a bridge connecting to the entrance. The bridge turned out fine once it was lit up. Design was partially reused from Asgore's castle from the Undertale world. The entrance to the castle followed, which started as a basic set of windows and a big door made of deep slate and warped wood respectively, and lit up with solar torches. When it came to adding the towers though, things got a bit tricky. The prophecy image shows 3 tall towers, we can ignore the other 2, they're not important. Each tower was initially represented by a sphere of the intended radius of the tower, the middle one matching the entrance radius, while the other 2 being a tad smaller. Once I extruded them upwards, I could connect the walls to the edges of the tower, rounding out the structure of the bottom floor. There was an attempt to build the Deltarune out front, so that developed into its own room on the first floor, since it was the only way I felt it could make it look good. After that, I mainly just added cobbled deep slate around the main tower and lit up more of the front walls, allowing me to move on to the interior. My main idea for the ground floor was for a ring layout around the bottom of the main tower. Lighting was a mix of solar lanterns and beacons, since I was able to get a good style going with the lanterns on chains hanging from the warped rafters. In the corners, I added some light seating, which is a liberty that I kind of needed to take because honestly, with a castle this big, it'd be a shame if the only thing here was a single cauldron. I mean, I get it's part of Lauzai's character, but we all agree that the little guy deserves better than that, especially in a game like Minecraft. Anyway, Grey's terracotta made for a decent pathway around the centre, definitely better than just the vanilla carpet. Then I pasted in the corner decorations around the area while fixing a small error in how I pasted the rear, which I noticed while doing the corners and finding they weren't connecting straight on. Moving on to the central tower, I had the temptation to take the easy route of making a straight set of stairs up front, but I didn't like that, so I put in the best effort I could to make a set of stairs that cleanly spiral around to the front of the first floor of the tower, and I think I did a good enough job at it, while it isn't not giving me needful effort. The central cauldron was expanded to a fire pit of multiple cauldron blocks since it fit in better with everything else and just made things feel less empty on the bottom floor. Now for the first floor, I started on Lance's loom as that was another structure block job, albeit with a few size alterations just to make everything fit. Chris and Susie's looms followed on each side, doors lined with the appropriate glazed terracotta with black concrete on the walls, while using the same methods as downstairs to light up this floor. For the interiors, I tried my best to get the magical feel of the looms, yes that's how they feel to me, deal with it. Features including glow lichen for the stars in Chris's loom, and axes on the walls of Susie's loom. For the last session on the castle, I added various decorations like more glow lichen around the town, and the change in terracotta since magenta glazed terracotta in default resulted in a ring having a bunch of arrows. That wasn't as nice of a look for it. I also added dungeon carts hooked outside the left wing, which I built out of lapis and diamonds, and okay, that might have been a bit of a lightning round of decor info, but I was moving on to the towers and needed a standout style for them, so by developing a mixture of warped wood and diamonds for the outer elements, like the top of the middle room, and blending them with soul torches and sea lions for illumination, I was able to settle on a solid exterior design for the smaller towers that I hope is able to stand out from my other castles. The finished base exterior of the small tower made way for King's Cell, which I added to the bottom floor with a door leading out to the courtyard with the prison carts. I felt like they went better outside as I didn't have to try for space. Plus, King is the only person you actually care about, so his cell was the most important. Some minor adjustments to that bottom floor later, and I moved on to the roof, which I kept open due to having no real use for it at the moment. Honestly, I expect we'll get to Chapter 7 and Lauzai's Castle becomes this Persona 5 style final dungeon where you get extreme lore dumps on Lauzai's origins, pulling together threads from throughout the game, culminating in... oh god. But we can worry about redesigning everything in 2028 when that chapter comes out. For now, the central tower was the final piece of this castle and was mainly an expanded version of the side towers, just more light-up windows on the flat edges, diamond wings at the top when the layers were pasted in, of course, and diamond rings allows the layers to round off decoration, and hence finishing our new refined version of Castle Town. There's a cozy feeling I have from this iteration of Castle Town. I mean, the track's called My Castle Town. It's meant to feel like we, the player, belong in this town. It's a place where we always wanted to go, to be, to escape assignments until Lauzai finds out and demands we actually do it. In other words, I consider my attempt at getting that magic down for the current Castle Town to be successful. I mean, I sure would want to sleep in this room. Wait, can I do that? Holy crap, I can. I really like Castle Town. It's one of my favourite parts of the game. Maybe I was starting to be won over by Deltarune after all. Is what I would say if we still didn't have 6 more gameplay files to read through. Seriously though, even if it was denial, I was still upholding the fact that I wasn't exactly into Deltarune as much as Undertale. It may be partly down to me being a gamer and being hard to please, not liking to admit that I'm wrong. And I know you're going to be like, oh screw you Harold, what is even your standard for a good game at this point? Well, I'm glad you asked. Introducing my scrapbook for outstanding video games, a concept that I definitely didn't come up with specifically for a visual metaphor for this video. It's a journal containing pages representing my favourite video games of all time, ranked firmly across the pages. Undertale is nestled in this list at a solid 4th place and has stayed there for the last 3 years. It is in the centre of what I like to call the indie game trinity. The father Undertale is in 4th, the son Hollow Knight is in 5th, and the Holy Spirit Celeste dominating in 3rd place. That's a plot twist, eh? Undertale isn't actually my favourite indie game, yet alone game of all time. But the point is, it and the other games here have meant something to me at some point, and have also just been really good games. The concept of adding Deltarune is intriguing due to that nature. It's not like the other games here, and that's got me thinking, what does it mean to add an inherently incomplete game to a list of complete ones? Am I jumping the gun too fast to declare 2/7 of a complete game a favourite? But most importantly, disregarding all of that, how far can something like Deltarune actually go? And could it even stand a chance at breaking the Trinity? Okay, we're not having that conversation right now, that's too deep a conversation for this area in the video. How about we just cut the philosophy and move to the cyber world? That's what you all want, right? Here, let me play us in. There we go now. Before I could start working on a new Dark World, I gave the library a new coat of paint after realising that the space I allocated at the end of Chapter 1 was too small for the computer lab. Certain rearrangements included moving the front desk to a more manageable position and adding the upstairs, which I surprisingly forgot about last time but was able to cram in here. Emphasis on cram because my refusal to change the exterior design complicated things a bit. The computer lab consisted of a line of computers along the back window with a door linking to the cyber world behind them. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The cyber world Harold's version. What's it going to look like? That was a lot more anticlimactic than the first time I did this. Okay, the world in its current state looks like I took it out back and gave the rights to Zack Snyder, who shot it with a shaky oiled up camera. But, as with any Zack Snyder concept, there's a perfectly good rationale behind it that you may or may not get behind depending on your beliefs. Let's go somewhere more comfortable. As you guys know, I like to build my creations into existing Minecraft landscapes, and in the last video I built out of a forest and a lake near the mountain used for Castletown's terrain. Since then, I became intrigued with the idea of basing each successive Dark World off an existing Minecraft biome. Think any 2D Mario game theme, but more interesting. For this one, I wanted to do the desert, which is perhaps the most bland choice of biome since there's nothing here but a stupid temple. However, with a bit of fiddling, I could make something out of this desert. In the Cyberfield's case, an industrial plane inspired by a computer's hardware, hence the black concrete powder dunes in front of me. On top of that, I made the underground blocks like sandstone, oxidized copper, and put an emphasis on redstone in places as a way of pushing its hardware theme in a way that equally makes sense in Minecraft terms. Redstone represents wiring, and it seems natural power comes from underground redstone clusters. It also felt natural for the wire traps to be powered via exposed redstone. Then, after terraforming the edge of the terrain, I moved on to the arch, which would be where you meet Queen for the first time. I think it's one of the only times I've actually added in the characters, which is mostly because I'm over digging the web for custom heads, but I like how the Queen's throne turned out here. So now we can progress to the main body of the field. The first cluster of rooms were a series of paths leading to the first set of teacups. As a large part of the early decoration process was adding a ton of copper bulbs around the place to act as lighting in terms of the glowy bits in the empty spaces of starting rooms. This extended to the big cyberworld sign itself and the pathway through this area, albeit the pathway ones being a bit more weathered. Of course, there was some form of pretentious banner fiddling for the sign, but when that was done it was a case of branching several paths around that part of the valley, surrounding those paths with pins also made out of copper. Waxed copper specifically, don't want this oxidizing on me, that would be a shame. The teacups for this part were placed in the corner, initially also going to be copper, but then I realised that not everything has to be made out of copper to be valid in this area, so I changed it to iron and lanterns last minute, making the contraption a slime block lift to the next level of the field. That next level is the stack of rhythm dodging segments up to the higher parts of the field. Though since the following segments are quite flat in the actual map, I reversed this by making this part descend. The obstacles here would be represented by minecarts, as a common rationale I have is that if I don't know what could be used for a moving obstacle, I just use minecarts. Spoiler alert, the functionality of the puzzles rapidly deteriorated in this chapter. The main drop-off points would be at the edge of the hill, where, while the player bounces down the slime teacups, the path of the beast would remain consistent and mostly just expand as a means of difficulty. Meanwhile, I used jukeboxes on the corners of the upper paths and note blocks to the ground under the tracks as means of music-themed decoration for this part. Adding the field's other decor around the path down through here, I finished by placing the minecarts on their respective tracks and sending them on their way. Wait, don't TNT minecarts explode when they hit? Son of a bitch. Let's pretend that never happened, shall we? We follow that part up with what Rausai describes as an editable cyberpedia. Whether this is actual theming or just an excuse to add more readable tutorials fitted in the context of the world, I took this line quite seriously. Arguably more seriously than I should have, because the next area was Wikipedia themed. Don't worry though, I don't name drop Wikipedia anywhere here, this part is mostly just a small encyclopedia-themed maze. I promise this project won't turn into Ralph Breaks the Internet by the end of it, okay? Honestly, the use of lecterns and quartz made it look quite distinct from the rest of the field in my opinion. At the end was Queen's arcade machine, nothing special unless you count the fact that this part of the game made me remember that I am in fact terrible at Punch-Out! The Cyberpedia maze here, or however you want to interpret it, also contained a bonus word puzzle on the side that gives us the fiber scarf. I assume it's a play on fiber optics or something, but that doesn't matter. After planning out the path following from the arcade maze, I crammed that puzzle in a small cave off to the north of the maze, allowing for the area's copper underground paths to serve some small purpose. The keyboard was a combination of something genuine looking with something the player can walk across but not backtrack on. The screen with the desired word went above with a chest below, with the letters being placed via custom heads. This part of the field held the gate up to the city, with some more beat drop puzzles leading to even more puzzles. We'll get to those ones later, let's just focus on this part for now. The door to the back end of the field leading onto the city was placed on the side of a small mound and fenced off for reasons we'll get into in a bit. From there, I pasted the same basic format of beat puzzle, but widened a bit more and given some redstone decoration to power more rails. I was attempted to extend that concept of redstone damage by adding some gaps, but they didn't look right, so I just kept things quite clean here. Finally, at the end was the agree to all word puzzle, which unlocks the teacup maze, I'm pretty sure. This puzzle was in a more keyboard-like layout, with the letters being stacked more like breaches for visibility purposes. Trust me, it was a pain to get all the custom heads together, but it paid off sufficiently in the end. So we're most of the way through the field now, and I'm sure you're wondering, when is he going to get to the interesting stuff? This place still looks like a generic desert to your right. This place could use some of the interesting backdrop material we see in the game. There were two ways I wanted to tackle that issue. The first way was to continue to expand the terrain copy from the overworld. The desert this was built out of had a jungle serving as backdrop, which I pasted in and transformed into this iron jungle between recordings. What is the functional purpose of this iron jungle in the terms of the whole map? Stay tuned to find that out. For now, the next set of recordings showed the second way I wanted to improve this place, by integrating the backdrop elements into the map itself. First off, I made a maze of teacups by, rather than making the player pick between 3 sets of teacup glides, stacking and arranging them like an actual maze above a lake of holonite acid. For the end of the route that leads to the fight with Fleet Captain Cakes, this was to go on top of a roller coaster, one of the features of the area's backdrop in the concept art, at least it's not really defined in the game. The roller coaster, starting from the agree to all puzzle, would be oxidized copper to go with the rest of the area. You can just about make out the slow rising pattern I aimed for in this initial stretch. The jungle was doing most of the heavy lifting for lighting and visibility until I got to the main platform where I made a gradient of bulbs on the long edges. Some less significant rooms followed, like where you talked to the hacker guy to recruit him, provided you found all the check marks, and another treasure chest, which I placed on top of a hill nearby. As for the rest of the maze, that was loosely scattered around the other parts of the lake, bordered off from the rest of the side world by the roller coaster. Although not functionally necessarily, I built the other half of the roller coaster leading somewhere that doesn't matter for the purpose of this video, adding it to the backdrop as well as making it easier to place in the final word puzzle in the corner next to it. Yes, I really did end up getting the random letters for these puzzles exact to how they were in the game, which is fruitless to point out unless you really did think I pulled a bunch of random letters and made a new path to form the... how do you pronounce that?
Gaius Velfbreber.
Thank you. Here's me placing the holonite acid. While less defined in shaders, the aesthetic went with the rest of the word and sets us up for Queen's Mansion, where that acid focus is key in the acid... But that's for later in the video. We're close to the city now, which means we've reached the music shop and have exhausted my Cyberfield gameplay recording. Regardless, I pasted in the music studio from Castletown and gave it new code to paint to match the aesthetics of the area a bit more. Then I redesigned some parts of the field to give certain areas distinct colours. Not all worked, I still ended up prioritising green across the whole area and may have noticed I switched shaded greens at one point early on. But at least it gives parts like Cyberpedia and the drop puzzles, which I just made a music themed area in general, a unique style to the rest of the field. Now for the back end of the field, this would be designed as some kind of factory, or rather a quarantine zone for viruses as a way of contextualizing the Deltarune puzzles that take place in this area, as McAfee Web Advisor forcing you to search using Yahoo in the year 2025 X Protection or some other really panicky antivirus program that flags every Minecraft mod as a threat. To get back on topic though, I formatted the place as a bunch of waxed copper pods to quarantine the viruses, combined with the conveyor belts of the room before that. The perfect amalgamation, in other words. Also, I liked the idea of trapping the viruses in cages surrounded by smoking lava in a fenced-off space of the field outside the city. Really puts that industrial theme forward, doesn't it? And to finish, out the back, before going onto the rice and teacups of the roller coaster, I made a massive copper bridge conveyor belt, providing a nice view of this half of the field. In concept. See, despite having finished the field in full, there was still a lot of work that needed to be done to make the field look as vibrant and as lively as the field in the game, and a lot of that had to do with the background elements. But as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, and at the same time, if I dedicated all my marbles now to getting the field up to snuff, I would have dropped off this project easily due to burnout. So consider what you're about to see part 1, a sporadic burst of improving the field's presentation, since I may randomly pop back here again to touch it up a bit. Wait on the video. I couldn't find any more Cyber's World remixes, so here's some high quality lips inspired by 2010's Roblox. Editing Howard here, that reference aged like milk. The first improvement I made was cloning the factory pods and spreading them around the empty space behind the fence. I ended up making quite a lot of these. I mean, there's quite a lot of viruses on the internet, and once they stacked up off the edge, I made some supports for the floating ones that look quite nice. After that, to add to the industrial vibe, I made up a small redstone tower that looks like a pin or something. Next improvement was the acid lake. I wanted to extend that back to the starting area, so there was something of note in the empty space next to there. I know it may seem lazy to fill in most of the empty space with water, and also not increase your render distance while rendering to stop your laptop from melting, but I made sure the backdrop wasn't all acid, as well as blending in the background terrain with the stream. Finally, there was the matter of the background attractions. I extended the roller coaster back a bit more, and along with that I got to work on a rough Ferris wheel design. Still made of oxidized copper to blend in, not making it the flashiest of things, but it sufficed for the purpose of more decoration, which satisfied the field for now. Placing that behind the roller coaster with a few more improved redstone towers, this rounded off the first iteration of the cyber field. I think I've sufficiently laid my cards on the table for my visions for this dark world, even if at this point, we're about a minute in the timeline, we had a long way to go to reach the ideal cyber world envisioned at the start. This was taking shape in the ways I wanted it to. Now that we're heading into the Cyber City area of this chapter, it was really time to up the ante of operation here. As for this area, predictably, we're going to build a metropolis of the internet just across the lake from the industrial workings of the field. So no pressure, right? This is where you cut to the next sketch. The best part about this way of logging my favourite games is that it's malleable. It's not fixed. I can add and move around any game I want whenever I want to. That's not to say I don't consider objective quality. I hate using that word, but it's true. Last year for my birthday, I got a Steam voucher that I used on Night in the Woods, and although both games got some form of impact on me, it was Night in the Woods that made it to the scrapbook because not only was it able to ease some tension I was feeling at the time, but I just really loved the game's elements like the gameplay quirks, the art style, the themes of not clinging to the past and having to let old things die, the autism. Sometimes the right game comes along at the right time in the game of life, and it can alter our perception of the game's quality in ways we don't realise until after we finish it. Whether we understand the themes more because it relates to our situation, or we just forge a personal connection stronger than others. That's what I think makes a good outstanding games list. And nostalgia, a hell of a lot of nostalgia. Hey, where's Howard gone? Okay, maybe the idea of building the entire cyber city terrified me. When I started recording Minecraft projects 2 years ago, I never wanted to be the mega build guy. I just wanted to be the guy who builds a smaller, more chill build project while listening to YouTube videos about why the latest season of Doctor Who sucked. Look, I was a different person back then. Ironically, these videos made me more sympathetic for the era. Though, I guess I should have known it was inevitable that if I were to continue building on that TikTok account, now YouTube channel, naturally things would progress to a larger scale build. I just had no idea when that would happen, or that it would happen during my end-of-year university exams, so I pondered an inspiration for this metropolis that wasn't Earthquake's the internet. And then it hit me. Everyone's favourite Gamers So Oppressed in Society game, Cyberpunk 2077, 18th in the Fated Scrapbook, was the perfect high-tech roguelike reference point for the Cyber City besides the
got something that
potentially inappropriate statement. You know. Yeah, I'm gonna have to issue a content warning for the Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay. This is a game for manly guys, it has manly themes, I am also terrible at it.
Yo! Loaded up a little bit too much this time.
My brother is so much better at the game because he based his V off of Uma Thurman from Kill Bill, while I based my V off of Brad Pitt from Bullet Train. There is a stark difference in the aura these characters hold. The plan was to use the game as a reference to build a few reusable buildings. I tested this theory in my first recording where I went to a real trash zone to determine how the city would connect to the acid sea, or lake, or whatever I say when I cut the Minecraft village. I did some light terraforming around the lake, especially down the river a bit. The coastline will look a bit better later, but for now I made a prismarine copper divider between the land and the sea. Obviously the natural landscape for the Minecraft desert was to be kept minimal here, only being given to the most key spaces. You know, see, the wastelands actually mean something now to the context of the map. Speaking of waste, on the end bit for fun, I placed some pipes where pure internet waste flows out to dissolve in the acid. Internet wastes include, but is not limited to, YouTube drama, video essays that call Deltarune woke garbage, and Minecraft legends. Okay, that last one was a joke, but number 2 may exist. I just haven't looked hard enough. Next, I travelled to the Westbrook area of Night City and stared at a random building where I built the start of the roller coaster around the city where you fight Birdie for the first time. I aimed for this roller coaster to be connected by a series of tall buildings around the city forming a solid loop, while one part goes off to the trash zone. The first one is obviously reachable via a series of T-cuts leading to the first station, or column for now. This design was inspired by some of the mega buildings from Night City, though interior-wise these mega buildings are a lot more expansive, like the H10 mega building in Watson where V lives. I didn't cover that basis simply because, at least for the time being, these interiors don't matter for the context of Deltarune. It's like my approach to New Home, where most of the buildings are, frankly, interiorless except when they're plot relevant, which is also the approach taken to Cyberpunk, ironically. Also, nice graffiti. Don't know why I'm bringing this up. If you played the game, you're probably way more concerned about my active quest, and yes, I did not mean to do what I did to get this quest. The top station design turned out relatively well. I made sure the minecart tracks were laid out in a working position. Then after that, I mainly just decorated the top area with some design quirks being inspired by my version of the Hotlands, and afterwards I didn't really have a plan. The obvious place to start would be the trash zone, since that's the natural start of the city in the game, though I wanted to maintain a balance between backdrop buildings from Cyberpunk and gameplay areas from Deltarune. So naturally, I hopped onto 2077 again, murdered another batch of gangsters in cold blood, and stared at another building while trying to make the best representation of it I could in Minecraft. At the foot of the first mega building, I placed the first of many loads, made out of cyan concrete as to maintain the fantasy vibe, and lit up with several deep slate and redstone lampposts. Now, inspired by whatever this is, I built a huge deep slate block of cyan and magenta windows as a simple yet vibrant way of making a big apartment block to add to the city's structures. The way I see it, if this place is meant to be the internet, then shouldn't big apartment buildings be small websites or something, like websites from Square? Out of ideas for that section now, I changed gears to the trash zone. That was to be a waste processing plant. Yes, that's really what I was going for here. To do this, I collapsed the seawall on the left-hand side of the bridge outside of the field, and then replaced it with various coastal blocks with redstone ore as they light up the place a bit. Next to that were piles of raw minerals, as they could be passed off as clustered rubbish when mixed together. The main plant was put up in the background and also given a recycle bin on the side. Why did I decide to make a giant recycle bin on the side? I don't know, I just felt it would be a funny quirk of the world. I continued to build the structure back despite being virtually empty. Again, the interiors that would be irrelevant were, well, irrelevant, and added a lot of redstone and iron details to it for decoration, mainly the large iron pipes on the side, and a ton of rubbish in the bin. There was some more building planned for the current phase of the city in the trash zone, mainly connecting the first load up to here, making it the alternative route that Susie and Wells I'd take. And believe me, despite the lack of a plan I had at the time, I still did have a few things I wanted to do here. But that was cut short when, well, we imagine the many thoughts going through my head upon barely recovering the last 25 minutes of build footage and ignore that ice cream truck outside my house again. It's time we actually get a plan forward, because if we keep cutting back to Cyberpunk 2077 every 5 minutes, I'm going to run out of 10 images to censor the risky elements in Night City to maintain Deltarune's T rating. Right now, on the project's timeline, we come full circle and approach the summer holidays. Funny how time flies, eh? Last video I was going about how I was spending my summer on Chapter 1, and now we're spending it on Chapter 2. Going in for the long haul on this one, I wanted to initially alternate between sessions that focus on the main path and sessions that focus on the greater city, until I had enough reusable elements to fill out the rest of the city. After all, if I could just fill in this corner of the map with enough buildings to fill out the main path, that would suffice with the scope of everything. Oh yeah, and speaking of scope, that was also a factor in things. Forget a Saltburn summer, we were in for a Deltarune summer, and this time I wasn't holding anything back. Seriously, the buying spree I went on immediately after my final exam, you'd think I'd be planning for the apocalypse. In all seriousness, this trailer at the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct may have been the other kick to get me going on the map. I mean, came through just 3 days after I beat Chapter 2, and I was still thinking about the end of that, and straight after the Direct I started doing the data pack. Why didn't I say this 43 minutes ago? Why am I this awkward about Chapter 2? So I pushed myself to get on with the city, the promise that I'll have it cooked by the release of the new chapters. You know, that's sure to work, right? I always need to press on the recording with 10 minutes into the section. I terraformed some of the mountains more so that there was a definitive stopping point for the buildings, mainly the trash zone. It was here I decided to round off the zone with everyone's favourite adware virus, youtube.com, I mean Spampton. Spampton G Spampton. This was at the very bottom of the recycle bin, as I felt the aesthetic of the minerals touched up with terracotta would be perfect for his shop. For the opening Welcome to the City room, this was a chance to get the greater city elements rolling as backdrop for the massive sign. The first building on this path was a small one with a similar palette to the trash zone with cyan and magenta lights. The colored lighting isn't needed, but is very effective for this area's presentation. Then we have our second road, a bridge going into the mountain in the background. I like to think of this as a way into the city, possibly through a strong-ish Wi-Fi connection. The structure was made of copper, which may or may not be the most vibrant block here, except in default ironically, but I felt it fit into the area's theme. While planning out a footpath, I conjured up another building design, more stone-based but with a more varied window palette. Also, yes, all the buildings will have this copper lining to it. I thought it gave each building a standout style and an extra glow to everything, plus it goes well with the oxidized elements and themes of the field. The main footpath went over the bridge to overlook the sign that was going to go next to it, and underneath that went a few more small details like even designed for a bridge and a car park for, I don't know, whatever small website those buildings represent. I don't want to accidentally product place a small YouTube sponsorship business since most of them end up being problematic. Across the bridge was a raised segment with a view of the side of the big building, the likes of which I covered in more light-up ads. Fun fact, these were actually set to the exact pattern they were in the game, and if that wasn't enough, I also detailed the roof a bit as well. On the corner of the raised part, I placed the first set of crossings as placing them perpendicular to each other would mean the path would lead on behind the first row of buildings, having the alleyway from the gap lead up to that path. Oh, but hells, the sign! I was getting to that, I just counted it as backdrop, so I saved it for the backdrop recording. See, there was a gap between the trash zone and the bridge, so I gotta be creative and turned it into a power glyph and wrapped it around the sign. If I'm going to shove in a computer hardware metaphor, I'd go with this being where Ethernet connections are processed. This is a stupid idea, I know, but hear me out. A school library is bound to have Ethernet lines, believe me, I know. When I was doing my A-level computer science project, I tried using an adapter to connect my laptop to the school's Ethernet because students couldn't use Wi-Fi. That didn't work, and I ended up hotspotting my mobile data because I'm just built different. The grid was almost completely redstone. Any space over the redstone ore was covered in pylons or pins made out of redstone and copper in another design we used for my Hotlins build, with enlarged copper wires behind them. On the opposite end of the bridge was a building made from prismarine and copper merged into the mountain behind it. This is one of my least favourite design looking back now. It's a bit bland and mostly serves as an implied tunnel to the underpass. It'll probably be improved a little bit by the map's release, maybe a few more features on the roof and the empty walls, but that didn't matter. I finally did the sign though at the end. It was positioned diagonally, so the headletters went both ways, but it turned out good in the end. We focused a lot so far on the front of the city, obviously to test the waters of my ability to make cyber buildings. It's time now we move into the inner city and layer things a bit more while also, again, still prioritising the main path through the place. The next few buildings were intended to surround the alleyway where Chris meets up with Noelle, who then joins the party afterwards. The party just being Chris at the moment. I split the main road off into a small one to account for the crow's part and marked an outline for the two buildings that would surround that alleyway. Oh yeah, I may have placeholdered a few buildings to save them for later. I know I just said I'd layer things up more behind the front part of the city, but I also said that the main path was a priority, so that then defeats that purpose. Besides, there was a third factor that was starting to come up around this point. You know how the back end of the city's gameplay, there's a highway section over a bridge to what in this map would probably be the land mass where the Queen's Mansion would be? I needed to factor that in as well. So parallel to an island east of where you come into the city, I raised some land and marked out a highway going into one of the central mountains of the desert. Why is the highway going under this central mountain of the desert? Well, if you're in the mood for one more Cyberpunk 2077 reference, I could not resist basing this part off Corpo Plaza, the heart of all capitalism, and where the... Oh god, I haven't even brought up the anime yet. Anyway, sorry for the Cyberpunk tangent, but if you've seen the anime, you will know how I feel. For now, I wanted to use this highway intersection as a way of implementing some of the features from the middle of the city. Around the mound, I made staggered walls of copper and prismarine in places where it curved, keeping a bit of black concrete for now for some natural stuff. Then, around the path I made up top, I placed a large yellow skylight for the below tunnels and intersection. Once the tunnel was carved out, that allowed me to bring the actual highway into that section. Lanes were narrower than the normal road design, but I guess that's barely an exaggeration for American highways, considering one of my trips to America involved an Uber driver having to get his mirror fixed after getting clipped on the highway to Disney World. For the upper highway, I reused the earlier copper bridge design for the edges, which went surprisingly well with the dimensions of the below one. Then I lined the walls and ceiling of the interior with more variations of copper and prismarine. You may be wondering where any of this is going. Well, I thought a good idea for the empty space around the highway was to reserve it for the fair where Susie and Rousey are seen together north of the Addison shops. To do this, I boarded off the path to the main space and decorated the surroundings with string lights and balloons. Well, the closest Minecraft can get to string lights and balloons. Under the upper highway, I placed a series of stalls and tables that just about fit in with the underpass. On the above path, I made a few artificial looking trees, think Rolex 2011 style, and a reskin of a previous small building converted into a shop for the Addisons to probably sell you, I don't know, a virus or something. The upper highway was to be used for the next road crossing puzzle, as that was to lead into another new building that would accommodate some of the main path. On the tunnel's other end, I mirrored the grassy layout of the other side and linked it to a crossing of the two lanes. Unrealistic you could cross the highway without going full Bergen trucken. I told you I'd find a good place for that. But it's Deltarune, so why wouldn't you? Unless you're Death's Holiday. Anyway, overly abundant memes aside, I made another Addison shop on the other side of the ring, this one being attached to a bigger building that would make up a good chunk of the main path from here. More Lorlac style trees were then added. I particularly like how the big one turned out. I also made some side ones on the lower grassy parts to make them stand out a bit more. This building I'm doing here will contain the last rooms before the mini studio save, that being the laser puzzle, the Ferris wheel ad which was outside, and whatever this is. For the laser puzzle with the pressure plates, this was placed in a nicely lit tunnel on the bottom and only traversable for the building, because of the main path and stuff. I used pistons because I'm pretty sure that's how I've done puzzles of this nature before, and as for the Bradley statue, well, look, the map's downloadable in the description, and if you download it, I implore you to destroy the statue upon entering the city. Trust me, you'll not be destroying anything of value. Since I had time left on the recordings, I wanted to make some kind of underpass where you come out of the mini studio, but didn't like how it turned out, so I just made it a regular shopping district. A few reusable buildings, a few new ones for this part, all made in the themes of the shops following the save with relevant details on the interiors as best I could, rounding out this half of the city. So here we are again, halfway through the chapter and on track to complete it in good time. I have to say, this halfway point feels a bit more warranted due to this. Oh yeah, I've been recording this for nearly a month now. I should take a break and have a drink. It's all's well and good with the map at this point, but looking at it now, I felt like it was forgetting something. It was something important to the game, something that the community will kill me for if I omit it for the final product. What am I missing? Oh damn, this part's looking kinda long. Better split it up for ease of watching. Right, this is part 2 of the Cyber City, which I'm dubbing Cyber Heights, and the latter parts are subtly referred to as the Heights. As we approached launch day for the new chapters, an event that I knew would halt development for the next week and a bit, I wanted to finish the mainline city by then, so I pushed for that to be finished by Wednesday of that week. That being said, if you didn't know, the game was releasing at midnight times the Switch 2's Japan launch, so here in the UK, that means the game would unlock on Steam at 4 PM. In other words, I still had Wednesday to build, and that was to be my spring cleaning day where I would touch up the rest of the city. So let's crack on with this final part of the mainland. The next road puzzle stretched across 2 main roads. One was wider than the other, which could imply another highway, but I didn't really want to do another highway crossing there, so I just built a bit further back into the city. After building another Addison shop and touching up some bits from the last recording, like the side of the previous building more, I made another road behind the current area, as well as a bridge over that one to act as the second road of the puzzle. The switch for the traffic lights were integrated into a copy of one of the buildings from the front of the city that was given some small roads up top for the smaller cars that you see run above the shopping district, since we're reaching the point where we have enough buildings to reuse. Now next up was the annoying Mouse Room 2, Electric Boogaloo, which was to go underneath that bridge. Reading on from the staircase on the other side of the bridge, I copied the side of the first mouse puzzle building to maintain the general formation of the puzzle. Functionally, I think I just gave up trying to handle these puzzles outside the box, since the functionality seemed to matter less at this point, and I've tried many times in the past and they haven't really been successful. Though it didn't stop me from adding the cheese maze in a dark underpass, which I think I nailed the design quite well. The next puzzle was Annoying Mouse Room 33 and the final insult. Please Mojang, add mice to the game in the next update so I can make rooms like this work. Then again, what use will mice have in Minecraft? Regardless, the second room being close by meant it was easy to carry things over, albeit with the new style of this freak wall being crammed in the corner so the path can loop back to the above road. The same wall from Pass 2 was copied as well, since it had the same light formation, which, now that all the mouse puzzles were done, I could fill in with custom heads here and in previous parts. I also made up this light up mouse on the side of the second one. No reason, I just thought that would be funny to have. So after the next save point we have the trash street and the burglary fight. I wanted to lead this path through another building linked to the annoying mouse room wall, so I got an idea. After the save point following the third mouse room, I started on a mega building H10-like apartment block. Okay, hear me out here. I wanted an excuse to make an interior on the main path, and it just so happens that we were coming up on the highway that would take us to the Queen's Mansion Island area that I planned out. If the highway were to go underneath this building, similar to how a highway runs above Mega Building 10 in Cyberpunk, then the burglary fight could go in the building above it, say in this dramatic corridor that I'm building right now. Very cool. Then, I add in the rest of the apartment-based details to the building, not much use functionally, but again, they add to the aesthetic of the area. And finally, leads down to the side of this highway, where Queen's Limo would be waiting, and could teleport the player to the island, considering we can't really feasibly add in the car minigame. Yes, even I don't know how I was able to make this work, but I did end up making this work, and after extending the highway around the corner, I parked Queen's Limo in the side of the building, just so it's easy to access for people who want to go straight to the island and not have to walk on the roads or anything. That happened a bit quicker than I expected, even when I was building it. Though don't be fooled, even though I did admittedly split this into parts determined on the halfway point, we still had a lot more to get through. Just because we couldn't put in the driving minigame doesn't mean I could skimp on the logic of the highways. I still needed to touch them up in preparation for the next day's launch day cleanup. First though, I finished up some of the finer details of the large apartment block, adding in some colored windows on the back end, along with some iron and redstone elements just to make it stand out a bit more. Same logic applied to the interior. Then I copied the main layout to make a second floor, so the whole thing wasn't looking entirely flat or like I only built it for a cool fight location interpretation, which is exactly what I built it for. This required a bit of innovation on how the layers would connect, and I admit, in order to achieve this, I did go a bit overboard on the copper, more so than other buildings, but it looked fine nonetheless. Now it's clearly time to move on to the road to the mansion, so I parked Queen's Limo on the underside of the main building and cracked on with the highway. First up, there was a tunnel back to who knows where. It's irrelevant to the map. At least I was able to make these nice Queen billboards. Then I made some curved roads down through the sides of the tunnels to connect up to the bottom. A bit of an oversimplification, considering a lot of big highway junctions like this in the UK look like this. Minus the Deltarune art, of course. I was thinking about it too much though, I'm not even sure if the car could realistically fit in here, but whatever. The last thing I did was extend both highways in a direction I hadn't done yet, one going west into a tunnel to nothingness, and the other prepared to go straight to Queen's Mansion through the main city, setting us up nicely for our launch day cleanup session. So Wednesday morning, I got my usual recording coffee at around midday, and I gave myself the next 4 hours to get the city in the most presentable state I could get into. Make it at 3 hours and 59 minutes. The first improvement I was able to check off was adding the barrier designed for the earlier bridge to every other road, mainly the two highways, focusing on the supports underneath mostly. Next, there was some terraforming, which was difficult to record, so skip most of it. Then I finished the top of the other large buildings on the main path by giving the upper sections an array of colourful windows and redstone and iron details. This top section in particular was a great boilerplate for a reusable block that could fill in large gaps in the city. Meanwhile, grass was placed on top of some of the shorter sections as another small effect for the building, as well as some roof contraptions. There you go, you can just about see me filling in some of the front spacing and the highway in this recording right here. Now it was time to fill in the placeholder buildings from earlier, which I admittedly nearly forgot about. The second one was a bit more unique because that hit the additional copper extensions were at the stay point in the gap where Noel and Greenhide are placed. When that was done, I moved further to the back of the city, pasting in some more large buildings to fill in some of the gaps and moles of the roads around them. This one in the footage was one of the only ones I engineered to actually connect to one of the highways. I realised I should have made more, that doesn't really matter now. The final thing I wanted to take care of, for this cleanup at least, was to finally get the mega building type buildings and subsequently the lower coastline city that connects them. I'm calling them mega building types now to suppress the cyberpunk parallels. I know they're not actually big enough to be a proper mega building like in the game. At the bottom floor of those buildings I added some stalls for decoration and some large ads on the side for standout detail. Then I copied a bunch of them around the city and wanted to connect them all with roller coasters in this recording, but 4 PM was fast approaching at this point and I needed to conserve some energy. So alas, I had to end the session there. I'm sure you know the rest. The full Deltarune package unlocked at the expected time of 3:58 PM and was the easiest £21 spent in my life, sitting nicely in my Steam library with the other games like Celeste, Hollow Knight, Night in the Woods, and... I spent the next week and a bit playing through chapters 3 and 4. All my footage from that has been gathered for the building of those chapters in the near future. I know you're probably wanting to know how me, the guy who admits he slept on Deltarune for years, responded to the events of Chapter 3 and 4. Let's talk about it over the building of the Leicester roller coaster rather than one of these Minecraft segments though. There's not much more to say about that build anyway. So yeah, not really a hot take, but I can firmly say that the new Deltarune chapters are very good. Like, it's so good to finally start seeing the story unfold in all the ways that was started 6, nearly 7 years ago now. I know it may be hyperbolic to say that it's refreshing to play something like Deltarune in the current age of gaming, but thinking about it before this project, I have to admit it wasn't just Minecraft projects I started drifting away from. It was kind of gaming itself. Like, around the time I started Chapter 2, I was dealing with a lot of fears that I was falling out of love with gaming, and it got to the point where I could only really beat games that I've already played, or that give me hope that the gaming deserves to die type video essays are wrong. A game like Monster Hunter Wilds unfortunately didn't fill any of those despite being good, so sorry Monster Hunter fans, I just couldn't bring myself to beat it with this mindset that I had. Outside that, every gaming presentation since the Concord State of Play gave me severe anxiety and or depression, and I only really find myself playing 1 or 2 new games every year. It scares the hell out of me, this. As someone who's dedicated his dedication to getting into game development, it's just... If it weren't for games like Deltarune, I probably would not still have hope that the profession is worth chasing. I would probably have fallen into the gaming discourse death spiral that consists of either the doom and gloom around gaming and layoffs and other narratives and stuff that bolster the gaming is dying and everyone deserves it narrative YouTubers tend to push. Or flat out bigotry that bolsters the objectively false gaming is woke and deserves to die narrative, which I've expressed fears of falling into in a previous update video that also went off topic a lot. What I'm saying is that it's games like Deltarune that kind of snap me out of this depression and make me want to do experiences like this. Is what I would be saying if this weren't a stupid Deltarune video, and none of that is relevant. Let's move on to Queen's Island before this gets any more off topic. The mansion would be across a massive bridge like in the game, which was mostly the rationale behind giving the mansion its own island. I spent the early phases of this session touching up the edge of the city, so there's more natural borders rather than basic concrete powder. After that, I extended the main highway across the lake, connecting to not the exact centre of the island, more so a flat zone close enough to the centre where the carnival could be built. And in case you're wondering where I've placed Spamton's little dumpster, don't worry. It's gone right next to the building where you come in. I thought it would fit well there. The bridge was heavily lit up with a large number of copper bulbs and leadstone lamps leading up to the island, which I started to terraform here. The island in question was mostly desert, but part bamboo jungle. The desert temple was moved there to that place myself. This will be important later. For now, considering any player could just TP there from the parked limo and TP back through the warp zone, I reserved the last quarter of the bridge for the next puzzle. Not really a puzzle though, more so a place reserved for Chris and Noel's really nice character moment. We even get a mention of deaths for the first time, I think. This was really wholesome. Why am I nervous about talking about character moments? Anyway, this part was done really quick. All it took was a bunch of alternating piston circuits in the road. The actual carnival went at the end on a empty circular patch of road. I made a gate into the heights area and copied a bunch of stalls from previous parts of the city, scattering them around the place and adding some more defined lights to indicate the higher class of this area. This class thing ended up actually being kind of a trend, as the small jungle part near the back actually gave me an idea. If I go all in on the mansion instead of the island, I could make it part jungle. When thinking about it more, it would imply that Queen's Domain here is actually disconnected from the rest of the city, giving it more natural elements and even full control over all the acid. Now that I think about it, isn't that just a plot to Rango? To be honest, I thought I was getting to some really phoned in allegory to classism. Whatever, let's get to the heights. So rather than try and make the heights like the rest of the city, they would act as more of a courtyard for the mansion. The last city-based areas would be on the lower right quadrant of the island and be surrounded by bamboo jungle. Obviously a far cry from the scaffolding in the game, but honestly it's my map and I'm the guy who made Undyne's House a pillager outpost, so I think I can handle this change. The puzzles in question were a mildly complex switch puzzle and the last of the mouse puzzles. No cringe naming pun this time, unfortunately. So after putting in the rundown set of teacups, I made the switch puzzle up top on a deep slate path around the terrain. The podzol served as a way of marking out where I was going to put the bamboo. On the next layer up was the mouse puzzle and some more balloons to go with the puzzle itself. I honestly don't have much more to say at this point. I tapped out at even trying to get these mouse and bucket contraptions to work. In the end, the main focus was just linking the main path up to the front red carpet of the mansion, and decorating the surrounding plains with jungle trees and vines and stuff. So with that done, let's have a look at our completed cyber city. Well then, that's pretty much it for the city. Kind of an anticlimax in how I was able to get the heights done in like an hour, and it may seem lately that my approach to implementing the puzzles into the map has kind of fizzled out, especially considering that I've been doing that since my Undertale world all the way back a couple years ago. Here's a reminder that I did not intend for the cyber city to get as big as it did, and that I never wanted this to be some sort of massive mega build. I just wanted to be a contained thing within the world. In fact, while trying to polish up the map during editing, even though I've added a few things like cars to make the roads feel more alive, I've seen a bunch of gaps that I've tried to resolve, and I really think I have tried my best for there to be as little gaps as possible, but if it's not polished entirely, that's on me because I admittedly overstretched things here. Regardless, that didn't stop me from doing a recording where I went and tried to improve things, so before I build the mansion, let's take a detour to our Cyberfield Improvements Volume 2. See, I didn't forget about that. While there were certainly other issues present, like the god-awful world cut off from the pacing, the main issue I wanted to tackle was the empty space that kind of served as city backdrop. So I put the circuit board theme on full display here, replacing the dead bushes with strands of loose redstone wires, and made large lines of copper in the ground. Resistors and chips were also made in places. The coastline ended up being redstone ore and towers. It may be redundant to make the lines curved, considering it's a circuit board, but this is meant to be a distortion lab, so I doubt the lines really matter that much. A few tweaks were made to the bridge design. There was also some desert on the edge of the map that needed painting over. This very back corner was reserved for some rough city elements to go behind the bridge and pretty much act as backdrop to everything else. It is my least favourite area of the entire map because its lack of functionality means it's just the same building over and over again with not much thought put into it, and there wasn't really much I could have done feasibly looking back at it now. I just don't advise taking the time to explore there because you're not going to find anything of value. As this improvement session drew to a close though, and I made the back of the city look as normal as possible, the final area of the chapter was truly beckoning. Right, one more thing to address for this stage's development. The Chapter 1 video. While I'm a bit insecure about how much of it becomes about my failed TikTok videos, I am grateful that the video did well, and while I'm unsure if this video can be as successful as that one, that didn't stop me from giving it my all in this final push. Not only has the development of the cyber world exceeded the previous chapter in terms of its length and size, it's also exceeded the length of my Undertale world's development. I knew that even if there was some stuff in the city that exceeded the grasp I was having on the map, the mansion would recenter that reach on one contained location, and if that location ended up delivering, the fate of my Chapter 2 build would be cemented. Let's finish this. Now, how was I to approach Queen's Mansion in a way that would fit in with the rest of the area? Well, that's where the Desert Temple from earlier comes in. It's a common video idea to transform Minecraft's vanilla Desert Temple. I've seen it done so much to the point where it felt like building Queen's Mansion as a Desert Temple transformation was simultaneously a canon event as a Minecraft builder in a parasocial sort of way. It just made sense as the cherry on top of this cake, or I guess the CPU on top of this motherboard if we're making a really bad computer science pun. So the exterior, this was laid out as a hollow tough pyramid with a 61 block diameter. In the centre was of course the entrance through Queen's Head, built here out of an assortment of quartz, glazed terracotta and prismarine, to add some more texture to the head, but not really trying to be realistic in a way that takes away from the absolute absurdity of the design. The letters on top were made out of redstone, that lit up when the shaders went back on in the next clip. And for some extra lighting, some sea lanterns were also dotted across the model for some extra decoration as well. The elegant entrance to the mansion is backdropped with a huge statue of Queen, later revealed to be a mech. We got the idea to design the mansion around it, in other words, building the rooms around the statue serving as the centerpiece in the middle of the pyramid. So, after going inside the mansion, I marked out the center and built a platform for the mech to go on. I had a few more things I wanted to get through before the actual mech, because I've not done many character models. Here's my rendition of Flowey. So let's move on to the front rooms. These covered the two rooms near the entrance of the mansion. Firstly the cafe, which was greatly expanded from the game and given its own cherry coat of paint. Meanwhile, the inner windows were given the design that blended in with the prismarine I was using, which could also be reproduced to the outside blocks. Back to the cafe now. I made an inner layer of pink glazed terracotta with various cherry and mangrove elements to serve as decoration. The back corner was the counter and storage, once the big windows were stacked to the side of the mansion to make a more manageable design instead of the slant wall. There were also warp bookshelves, which I made into a proper library here, that underwent a few iterations based on what I was doing with the windows. They were opposite each other at first, but later on I made it so that they were both at the back of the room so none of the windows were obstructed. I decided at this point to just do the rest of the exterior on the bottom floor at least, so I didn't have to deal with the slant walls while doing the interior. Besides, a more blocky exterior was required to actually fit in many of the rooms. Come on. Did you really expect me to fit in over 60 rooms worth of content into an actual pyramid of this nature? Those slant walls would totally break me. I took a step back from the main mansion for a bit to work on the jail parts, including the spotlight puzzles and the bottom room dining floor where you reunite with Lalzai in, anyway, the dining room went on the side and was pretty easy to build, just a red carpet and a bunch of tables, making sure to alternate the chair formation so I could squeeze the tables together. As for the jail cells, I took a similar approach to castle towns and placed them on a flat space outside the mansion, or rather inside a cliff outside the mansion. This corner cliff here felt suitable for the stacked up door nature of it, and it meant I could make them into long pod things without disrupting the design of the mansion. I started on a tower design so I had something to go off of for the spotlight rooms. The ones for the main mansion were placed on each corner and consisted of two windows on each side of one floor separated by glazed terracotta. For the spotlight rooms I placed the tower design in the ground and made half the floor as a staircase and the other half the puzzle using the windows as the lights. Not the best representation of a puzzle like this, but it fit in with the design I was going for. Same was repeated on the second floor, and then led up to the plane outside the dining room where the final spotlight puzzle went, which was more conventional than the others. Okay, now I really need to finish the mansion's layout, I can't put it off anymore. I finished off the windows in the lobby surrounding the centre, but at least on the first 2 floors I struggled to fit in the third at this point. Once those sides were copied over, I did the same on the exterior where things were finally starting to take shape. So now, I think it's time for something you'll definitely want to see me do, or struggle at again, I'm not good at models. That's right, it's the part where I build the giant freaking robot in the middle of the palace. The mansion itself ended up being a bit tight for building, so I moved things outside to give me a bit more room to work with. My initial approach was to make the arms and legs out of diamonds and then the body out of lapis, and as you can see it took a bit of work to get a shape I was okay with. My aim was a balance between a more mech-like design, as you can see with how some of the limbs are jointed, and a design that doesn't look too weird, if you know what I mean. The lapis was later changed to obsidian because I just didn't like how the lapis looked, and I thought obsidian would look a bit more armor-like. Meanwhile, I also added some amethyst for extra detail on the hands, body, and head. Overall, the statue/mech ended up being the best I could do. You could argue how this looks like how Queen's mech would look if it was made by Michael Bay, especially the dark arm. I mean, come on, he would totally do that, but I don't know, I think it's just cooler like this. However, it didn't fit into the rigid pyramid structure, so not only did I have to place the feet on a lower level, addition we'll touch on in a bit, but I also needed to raise the top floor significantly so everything could work out. The back of the mansion was also a factor as well. I wanted a design that would realistically allow the mech to get out of the mansion. Overthinking it, I know, but I just wanted something dynamic. This first design would end up being scrapped later because it didn't feel as enclosed as I wanted. I was able to get a good roof design together though by dividing up the basic pyramid shape and raising certain parts to allow for much headroom for the mech, as well as the throne room at the very peak. This was lined with copper to imply some sort of functionality to these back sections, just a section that could open up to unleash the mech. Those ideas fell through the next day since I felt like, although I still wanted that idea to inform the mansion, I also wanted things to actually feel enclosed, so I changed those initial bridges to an actual large window at the back that would only really serve as extra space for some other rooms. While the inner third floor was being perfected, the supports around the bottom of the throne room were also made into windows, again to enclose the whole structure. The plan now was to use this top tier around this part to be the approach to the throne room, leading to both the staircase up there and the path to the fountain. The path would divide on top of the large space, which I topped with copper grates to still maintain that the initial idea that the space could open up and unleash the mech. I swear this idea holds much more weight later when I'm not trying to be pretentious. But yeah, this back window here in the shape of Queen rounded off the mech and exterior phase of the build. It was tiring to figure out the logistics, but I'm glad something was able to be worked out, and honestly I'm proud of how this turned out. So now it was time to actually get through the interior of the mansion, since I was completely locked into building at this point, and really just wanted to get this done. No, seriously, I began working nights at this point. Here are some of the modification times for the recordings. Please tell me this is normal. To recap the key rooms of the first floor, we have a room where Mona Lisas of Queens spit fire at you, a maze of pottery that's pretty much impossible not to break, the task paintings leading to the fight with Task Manager, and the roads leading to the dining room which henceforth lead to the basement. The first room was pretty standard stuff, as that could go on the left hand side mostly, even though this means it's not part of the main path, at least I could still put the treasure behind the painting. Literally speaking, because this is Minecraft, the pottery maze was in the centre and the light hallways, as it would end up being a smart use of the more open spaces on this floor, and also a good way to divide up the paintings so some could still be on the main path. After the next set of paintings were the Task Manager ones. I ended up moving this set over a bit to make room for the gate linking back to the lobby, and a second thing we'll make later. Lastly, after where the fight with Task Manager would be, I split the paths between the next floor and the roads that followed, moving into the basement. Yeah, that's right, I'm moving those roads to the basement and you can't do anything to stop me. For context, I knew that the outline of this floor wouldn't be enough for the roads and dining room at the end, so I planned a hallway going to a, painfully British term coming up, roundabout, around Queen's feet, where the dining room would go at the back. God damn it, how many more times is this going to happen? I would like to advise everyone watching that not only has this issue since been fixed, but I've moved production entirely to a new desktop PC rather than my laptop, which I've been making videos on for the last 2 years. This video is the last one I'm doing on there. Thank you. Back to the build. Once things were back up and running, I made the roundabout as a carpet version of the city's roads and some regular tough walls around the place. The dining room was mostly copied from the upstairs one and given a new palette to fit in with the road down here. Another thing I did was place all the assorted rubbish at the back ends of the room, since that will lead nicely through to the real basement. Specifically, this was placed directly under the gate right of the statue that I mentioned earlier, so a short could be made back up to the lobby like in the game. However, if you go along that corridor more and through the keygen gate, you'll reach the staircase to the real basement, where the iron caves leading up to the Spampton fight will be. And boy did I make some iron caves here. The caves were made entirely out of raw iron as a way of showing ruin in the cave, as well as just being straight up accurate to the game in any texture pack. The main cave led to a big space representing the large teacup obstacle segment with additional decorations of teacups and vines. But what about where you fight Spampton? You know, how would one even translate that space in a satisfying way to this Minecraft transformation? Wait a minute. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. The Spampton Neo Fight roller coaster was to go out of the mansion and through the iron jungle at the back of the cyberfield. This time I actually decided to record the secret boss area because, let's be honest, this room's less of a secret compared to Jevil. So I made a small Spampton on the other side of the track before I started building that. I went from redstone blocks to torches while coming up with a consistent design for it, and once I did, I led it out of the end of the cave. This part outside is a shelf to the right hand side of the mansion, where the track would proceed to go at a small angle to run parallel-ish to the line between the field and the iron jungle. Calling it the iron jungle feels kinda odd, as like I'm describing some irrelevant fantasy thing, maybe because of the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones. And even though the jungle was only really meant to be a backdrop for the field, mass replacing the wood, leaves, bamboo and vines with raw iron and rods and grow lichen respectively was my way of blending it in with the hardware theme of this end of the world. It also looked like the backdrop in the fight in the game, so it was mostly a case of trying to adapt it for the world, which I just mentioned, and honestly I'm just trying to pad out time while I work on this long track that took me 2.5 hours, and somehow managed to render in long take because I'm that pretentious. But the track ended here, so now I just went back and forth loading and unloading chunks because my laptop could not handle massive render distances, placing in some extra features for the tracks. This was mostly for decoration purposes, as well as to add some kind of logic to the fight. Like the iron rails above, that could be where Spampton could be hanging off of. I just thought that would be cool. At the end of it all, I really liked how it looked, and I just spent the back end of the recording polishing the acid around it, since it would inevitably have to be an improvement at the end. Oh, and since I know you'll want to know how I did in the Spampton fight. Not that bad, actually. Anyway, we were sort of running out of time at this point, at least by my personal deadlines, so I proceeded to go full speed ahead on the second floor. The floor was a bit more packed than the previous. As well as the teacup puzzle up, there was also the many platters that exist on this floor, another set of flame-throwing paintings, the big dining room with the annoying dog, and a few other less significant rooms that I'll bring up when I get there. This was when I started work inside the towers. I couldn't do anything elaborate with the teacup, so it's just a slime jump upwards. I also wasn't sure how to exactly link things up, so I initially made a diagonal hallway, which was quite thin to my liking, so I ended up changing it later on. The first set of platters went in that corner of the floor. I didn't want them to take up too much space, so I just kept them to a single block of tables with shulker boxes. For the next set of paintings, I took things outside. To extend the path to the outside felt like a good way of expanding the main path in a way that everything could fit in. It also meant I could redesign the tower connections to basic archways for traversability purposes and put one of the bookshelves in the tower. Back to the main building. The back corner was reserved for the kitchen, which I covered in stacks of smokers and furnaces. And then I placed the platter room on the balcony in the back center space. It made me glad I ended up changing that area design, because I doubt I would have been able to fit this in otherwise. It worked pretty good in the end. I'm pretty sure I can speedrun the rest. We have the grand table room, another pathway at the other end, some more platters, and finally the next teacups up. Okay, next floor. The third floor. Didn't really have much of note, so we'll have to improvise a little bit. The start of the third floor had the arches from below carry over here, except for actually connecting to the mansion, since I wanted a staircase to the top in the corner this time around. Inside, there wasn't much space for actual rooms, but I was able to build into the head for the projector room as well as a conceptual control room, as you can see. Or not see, because I screwed up the lighting. My bad. But here I could also place the bathroom and some bonus features. I like to think there's some sort of if plan fails press here button for the Mac, just my own personal headcanon. I also placed 2 bookshelves at the back. They'll lead the player back down to the bottom floor. Now, as for some of my own decorations to this part, I wanted it so there would be a constant stream of acid around the entire mansion taken up from the source. This was because of the top. This was too big to fit in a large tunnel, so as a theoretical way of getting the acid around here, I would run some streams around the edges of the outer layers of the floors that would hence run down to the bottom. This was also a good opportunity to decorate the front of the mansion with acid lakes these streams could gather in a place that I could actually get the butterfly effect. Plus some more trees surrounding the place. Also, the cafe needed to be fixed from the streams, that wasn't too much of a problem. Right, what's next? Oh god. Okay, so the acid tunnel of love, as the track puts it on the 3rd floor, but not in this version, is the power source of the mansion and the place where Chris and Lauzai have, well, they kind of, Oh, hi. I guess you're expecting me to touch on the acid tunnel. We don't need to do that right now, that was an awkward moment anyway. In fact, I've already moved on to my next Minecraft build. Here, you can see on this projector right here. Started making a few small islands with plushies and other stuff on them, aren't they cool? We don't need to worry about the rest of this map right now. We have other games in my Steam library to cover, but not this one because we don't need to talk about it right now, and I promise this isn't just more cringe, awkward trauma dumping. Oh, wait, what are you doing? Don't touch that cover! Get the hell out of this mansion. I'm sorry to have to pull you, the humble Minecraft viewer, into another one of these downer sections, but my attitude in this video has admittedly been cringe, to say the least. It's been a badly kept secret or video that I've had some buried feelings about not just this chapter or this map, but video games and fandom in general. I think it's because throughout the build process I've been engaging with more online fandom over time, and even though that's a more positive thing than the last video, it's no secret that fandom is known to be on the collapse for several reasons. In fact, I've been so insecure on how to put these feelings into words that this is the 3rd draft I've made of this section, the current iteration being written 8 minutes before the video's original release date, before I delayed it to right now. But, whatever. Here's my best and most concise way of attempting to describe things. I came into this year and project off of a terrible 2024. Not just the events detailed in the last video, but also off a terrible experience in Helloverse fandom that I made a few pretty dumb videos on it. One was 3 hours long, and a horrible, horrible experience putting together. I wanted this experience to somewhat inform my channel's banner, if you know what I mean, just something I stand for. Basically, I stand for being okay to be cringe. And to do that, I played a problematic video game about cannibals, and just don't play it if you're under 18. Stuff happens that people hated the guts of. And I mentioned earlier using it as an impact pillar for that banner last Christmas along with Night in the Woods, and I wanted this to prove that the internet's fandom discourse is obsolete, that you shouldn't listen to it. I don't need to bloody tell you why it didn't work, like, don't get me wrong. Unlike some individuals, I won't murder you over your Steam library, But trying to force an impact for the sake of some dumb channel banner, it doesn't work. That's what I was missing in those previous resolutions. You can't get that impact if you're expecting it. You have to be caught with your guard down, or even when you don't expect to be proven wrong. Hence, my time in the acid tunnel with Rauzai was the weirdest I've felt playing a video game in a while. It's where fandom's biggest discourses seep in because, as of what I've heard, a lot of different reactions have crashed converging on this very moment. If you want my take, I blame T-Theory. Seriously though, that awkwardness hit me so deep that I overthought the ending part, panicked, and did the peace sign instead of the popular option of hugging him, because I feared the implications and wasn't really in the space to think about that in the moment. Some other stuff afterwards made me think harder at the end of the chapter, but I'm saving that for next time because this video is long enough. When it came to actually building this part, it gave me the chance to think about it more, and a few conclusions came from that. Firstly, I hate modern fandom, actually. It's a cold take, sure, there's no shortage of video essays that parrot this point. I hate it because it's what was stopping me from being able to process my late Chapter 2 feelings properly, because I feared that feeling the attachment to these characters would be frowned upon. The current culture of trying to be as unproblematic as possible is one that is utterly character-destroying. Saying this as someone who has made himself out to be the people-pleaser over the years, I can say it is not worth chasing if it means I have to pout constantly about something as trivial as what's in my Steam library. Second, don't be afraid to explore and express these feelings. I admit that part of the reason this video took so long was that I struggled to put how Deltarune made me feel into words, and of course related to this project, but I don't know myself how to express my love for Deltarune in much other ways than this map here. It's what I see in this game and universe, and I'm glad I was able to express it to you, and I'm sure other fans will find it comforting to see their special interests be expressed like this. I'm sure I am. I went exploring Chris and Lauzai art after beating the chapter, and this comic, this one right here, it made me cry waterfalls. I'm not sure why, maybe it's because it was late at night and I was vulnerable, but I'm grateful that this universe was able to make me feel this way. Whew, that was a heavy one. An admittedly a humiliating confession, but it would go against the banner of the channel to actually be guilty of it, so I'm glad I was able to get off my chest here. I hope with that out of the way, we can settle these nerves and finally make our way through the map's final week of development without any trouble. Considering we've done the whole traumatic context thing like last time, it would be only fair this final section be formatted on a Monday to Friday countdown to the end of the project. So yeah, let's put these grievances aside and close the book on the cyber world once and for all. Trust me, at this point in development I was ready. I just realised by turning that last section down I have a bunch of leftover recording gameplay where I build the roofs of all the towers with beacons on top. That's the cost of cutting your content down a bit last minute. If you did stick around in that last section, I thank you. I know some of those sections can be a bit awkward to sit through, especially in a Minecraft video. I guess that now I should start thinking of which remixes I want to have helm the last parts of this video. Let me think. Well, I can't use Antonym again because I used that up in the intro. I'm pretty stuck on this one. It'll have to relate to me finally liking Deltarune, as I'm probably going to be putting it in the scrapbook at the end of this video. Wait a second, the scrapbook! Oh man, that explains a lot. If you think about it, Persona and Deltarune's premises are kind of the same. Traumatized teenagers go into an alternative world and solve problems in that alternative world that have impacts on the real world. They also both have moments that stick with me deeply. I mean, this one's at the very front of my scrapbook. And most importantly, they both have absolutely banger soundtracks. Yeah. We're fighting to steal hearts with this one. Yeah. Don't think there's a single soul who hates Persona's soundtrack, so I should get away with putting it in here. Anyway, let's start this final stretch, shall we? I should probably explain some of my previous rationale for the tunnel. Since this was moved underground, I made it cave-themed but with regular iron to make it stand out from the phantom caves, and with beehives as little houses on the grassy islands. The room order was reversed slightly from the game, with the rules card fight going on an outside part that was currently unused. I felt this open space would be better for the fight, as not only was it unique from the rest of the tunnel, but if I wrapped the stream around the edge and ran one of the front pools down here, I could put a mass of houses in the middle acting as the game you play in the fight. The iron bars above it are for the light and implied functionality for the game, nothing too special. Other than that, I just pasted a few more jungle trees and bamboo around the place to fit the decoration in with the rest of the island. As for the mainstream, that came around to the other side of that shelf of the island, back into the ground, and running above the first tunnel. Once I was able to finish covering up this part in foliage, as well as also putting in some foliage, and I went into the cave and started carving things out. You can just about see that I connected this upper tier slightly to the first cave, since they were close enough together to be merged a little bit. In terms of the puzzles, not too much was done in terms of functionality. Again, this was the least of my worries at this point, and also space was tight due to the phantom caves being right nearby. All that was really left for the tunnel was to connect it up to the other back tower. I guess this place here would be where Lalza and Chris have their moment, and their picture, which I made a backdrop for out of loose parts buried in the terraforming. On the other tower, I made a rough route up to the top of the mansion, which I had to redo due to an axiom error. Also, there were some pipes in these towers going to the top as a way of contextualizing the acid flow throughout the structure. Overall, I was happy I was finally able to get this done. Even though it took hours to make it in its entirety, I'm glad I was able to settle those ever-present acid tunnel grievances in this build. Even if it took like 6 or 7 minutes for autistic ramblings about whether I should have hugged a goat to get here, but I apologise for that. Now that the last major area was done, we still had the structures of the other cute endgame character moment to tackle. Plus the throne room, I haven't forgotten about that, and Noelle's room. Okay, what I'm saying is, this was where things really started coming together. Noelle's room went on the top floor of the front right tower. To stop the dripping and for a nice effect, I made the roof glass and decorated the place with glow lichen and cyan carpets. The glow lichen is just my go-to for any solid lighting. The same glass roof effects were applied to the other towers, then afterwards it was time to move on to the Ferris wheel, which was to be part of another, this time bigger, carnival section on the other side of the house. Another one of my additions that I thought would just make sense. Although I initially copied the wheel from the field, it needed a complete overhaul to not only fit in with this area, but to actually have some sense of function to it. I mean, it won't turn, but the carriages will be there. I quickly scrambled together a reference of the London Eye from the Google Street View to try and get the logistics right. The whole thing was to be supported by a stand connected to the centre made out of different types of copper and gold. At least that's what I decided on in the end. The design I went with allowed for a logical getting on point both at the bottom and from the bedroom itself. The rest of this carnival had a lot of things copied from previous parts just for time's sake, like several stores and stuff. But I was able to add some originality by making my own short roller coaster on the side. Like the Ferris wheel, it was similar to the field one, but with a lot more flashiness and functionality to it. The piece of land that roller coaster lapped around, seeing as how it was the last big part of the island that was mostly meaningless, was converted into a small lookout point, just something the player can use to view the rest of the world, at least the jungle part of it. And of course, finally, the throne room took its rightful place atop the pyramid, meaning there was only one thing left to do. Cue power jingle. The true final boss of this build was the all-important fountain that gives the world its power. It would go off the edge of the landmass, just like last time. But not only did I want to completely overhaul the design I made last year, something I wanted to do ever since seeing it in the video and not really thinking it looked as good as I thought it would, I wanted one final touch to the mansion, something that no other build of Deltarune like this would probably dare to do. And that is the fight between the Flash Machine and the mech statue. This was, without a doubt, the most ambitious session I had ever done in the history of my channel. Coincidentally, this was on the 2nd anniversary of the first recording I had ever done on my Undertale world. And believe me, I would kill to go back to the simpler times, building a medium-ish, kind of small-scale reimagining of Undertale in Minecraft. But, again, there was inevitability from the moment I started that first recording. Evolution of my builds was needed. I would improve over time, and as my following grew, well, I would have to grow my builds as well. So although I have been reluctant to call this a mega build this entire video, it was here I needed to stare this project right in the eye and say, the fans deserve this build, and I'm going to give it to them. The landscape behind the mansion needed a lot of touching up in order for things to work, so I drained the whole thing and I terraformed so much of this that the chunks on my laptop could barely keep up. In the middle of the back area, I raised the ground to make way for our battle area between the two mechs. My reference for this was the final battle with Chibi over Ziplash of all things. Cringe, I know, but necessary. When cloning the central mech, I made a wireframe with the outline to help with posing of the model. Considering the structural things here, rather than a punch-out stance of fighting, I wanted to do more Street Fighter, so the posing was more 2D fighter coded, if you know what I mean. If anything, the way I did the legs felt more JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, if anything. The nerves here are probably why I'm doing so many references, but anyway, once I raised things a bit, I got to work on the Flash machine itself, starting with Rao's eyeless legs, since each part was based off a member of the squad. Realising this led me to treat this model as if I was making my own interpretation of the squad themselves, and while I'm not artsy enough to think of things like that, I was able to put together something using the same minimal-based tactic I used for Queen. Didn't know how to tackle the head, since you're not choosing the Flash machine in Chapter 1, so I'm sorting out my refs, I made it Chibi Robo. Screw you. The fight area in the end turned out really well. Once the growing parts were added, it looked like Deltarune x Bayformers x Street Fighter x Chibi Robo Ziplash, meaning it was time to kill my rendered chunks again and start working to refill my newly terraformed cyberworld border. I made a temporary blockade out of redstone for visibility's sake and for ease of tearing it down once I was done. This slapped around the entire edge of the world, at least where the lake was, all while painting the ground so I can get the aspect of Soul Sand no trouble. The shadowless part of the fight area was due to the conceptual fight needing to be only slightly in the water for things to work. With the water filled and the bridge finalised, it was finally time to start on sculpting out the fountain, something I would definitely need to take my time with this time around. Starting out similar to the original, but with a constant radius this time, which once again was the trigger distance to the Skulk sensor home, I wanted to have an emphasis on the flame effect this time, while also maintaining the watery format to things as I originally wanted. Near the bottom, I painted on a few wisps of sea lanterns just to see what they looked like. You could argue what I was doing was too thick for the intended effect, but I don't know, this idea I really liked, so I tried it again on further glowstone cylinders up and down the zone, and well, it worked. It bloody worked. All I needed to do now was make a constant source of water at the top and I was done. So, a few replace commands later to apply some glass to the lanterns boosting the effect. And now, after all we've done to make this cyberworld a reality, it was finally time to open the fountain. I mentioned making this cyberworld a reality, which is odd to think about, since that was the other thing that hit me at the end of Chapter 2. When the team want to stay in the cyberworld and make another fountain on Queen's request, Ralsei has to explain the loring, and well, that was when I got Deltarune. This is a theme that I'm eager to explore in the coming parts of the map, because, truth be told, I get it. I too want worlds like these to be a reality. I mean, I'm biased because this is my creation, but I feel it. And despite everything, I also want to stay in this cyberworld a bit longer, mainly because, well, we still have a few more improvements to make. The back end of the city wasn't something I was going to dwell on for much longer. I mainly pasted a bunch of buildings around that place to fill in the gaps and rounded off a lot of the roads in the process. The back of the city wasn't really that much impressive, which I understand, but again, wasn't really meant to be a traversable place. After production, I continued making the city's layout as tight as possible, filling in gaps in most places I was able to find, adding in cars on active roads, and other wacky things to enjoy. Now it was time for... I'm not using that music again, I'm too tired. This final run through of the cyber field focused on two things: placing emerald towers to contrast with the redstone ones and to light up the sky like in the game. Second was to expand my circuit board layout across the rest of the empty space the field had, which also involved a variety of towers surrounding them. This made it so that I finally had the intended backdrop to the field I wanted, and I've gotta say, I'm quite happy things were able to turn out like this. And with that done, it was finally time to leave the cyber world behind. Castletown and the Card Kingdom went on to get the same Dark Fountain improvements in the same session. They were a lot easier to make since I already had the strategy down for them. I didn't make much more improvements to the Chapter 1 content because even though I said I would, I admit I got cold feet reading last video's comments due to the number of views it got. Maybe the attitude I've had in this video explains why I struggle to read even the positive comments. But I was also tired as hell. The memory of this final fountain was mesmerizing to say the least. Improvement Night wasn't a joke, just I was building this well after midnight. Nothing on but the screen of the computer and the ambient light from the street with the moonlight in front of me. It was like a dark world of its own. Maybe that's what intrigues me about this game so much. Friday, the 11th of July, 2025, 11:31 AM. This is the last session you're giving yourself to complete this project. You've been awake for so little time after sleeping at your desk that you can consider this recording as if it was made back to back with the previous. Meanwhile, your entire week has consisted of large-scale builds and you need to round that stuff off today satisfyingly. What do you do? This recording was just normal. No large-scale stuff, no big ambitions, not even a cup of coffee. I was just building like I used to in 2023. Same style, same dimension. I even scraped together a more balanced Doctor Who video essay. I took this approach not because I was tired or just wanted to spend this time moving some stuff around in hometown, though I did highlight that the church needed renovating. It was because I think it just fit well with hometown's vibes. I mentioned last time it felt like coming home from a long journey, being able to explore here at the end of the early chapters. That's how I felt then, and it's how I feel now. And now is way more intense than then. Maybe it's because both this chapter and the build were more intense but impactful at the same time. I ended things off like last time at the Dream Residence, moving from where it was in Chapter 1 to lay the groundwork for Noel's house, which I'll build in Chapter 4. I converted that extra space to an improved spawn point for the world looking out on the lake nearby, and once the spawn point here was placed and decorated, this peacefully concluded my build of Deltarune Chapter 2 in Minecraft. Wait, one more thing. There's a few loose ends on this video that haven't been tied up yet. Why did I shoehorn in other games into this dumb Minecraft video? Why did I reserve space for a Chapter 4 build now? And what came of that other build when I was crashing out earlier? First off, that was meant to be an April Fool's video, but then stuff happened and that fell through, but I get it. This has been a weird route to take the video. I'm guilty that I've pushed my luck with my format, and if you've stuck around this long, you're probably expecting things to culminate into something special at this point. I've wanted to get at something all video, and I felt like the games I brought in were key to that conversation, whether for subtext or build inspiration, or whether the game just drives creativity in general, for me. Even with the games the internet will execute me over. Unless that was always an elaborate scheme to secretly integrate the Snowgrave route at the last minute. That's exactly what I did. The Snowgrave route had me thinking a lot about fandom. When Toby changed the metaphor for the moment in Noel's house in Chapter 4, I thought a bit about it. Sure, it's the internet being dumb about dark stuff in a video game again, but I understand Toby's response here. It's in a way a compromise of the reactions rather than spite of them. So I built Noel's house here, going against my initial method of containing chapters. I'll not describe things here too hard because I need to wrap things up, but that April Fool's dimension ended up being a blueprint for a dreamlike bonus dimension revolved around the weird route. You can access it in the download, provided you know how to get there. But the thing that I got the most out of that, despite not even touching Snowgrave at the time, is I hate modern fandom, but I'll never make stuff out of spite for that fact. All fandoms have had their moments, sure, I know about the cookie thing, but I will always have respect for those who like Deltarune. It's what's been motivating me throughout this process. Yes, some of my tactics may be cringe and risky to put in a video I'm sure will get a ton of views, but like I said in the last video, the attitude I find cool about this game and its fandom is the attitude expressed in Antonym, that it's okay to embrace this cringe style, and well, this map is my cringe style. I love it. Thanks for watching. The Reimagining Deltarune Chapter 2 in Minecraft project is out now for download on CurseForge. After uploading the map, I finally added Deltarune to my journal of outstanding games, on one condition. The actual placement would be withheld until the game finishes. I know I can't definitively say it's better than some games here in its current state, but I'll say this. That feeling I got when I put that bullet through Yardbo's head at the end of Persona 5, a symbol of the culmination of 100 hours of growing with this world and its characters. If Deltarune's final moments can make me feel how that moment made me feel, well, the keys might just be granted on the spot. So I'm excited for where this story goes next, in the game and in the build. To play us out of this massive video today, I thought it was finally time to give this map the cinematic trailer it deserves, kind of similar to my Undertale one. So I pulled a copyright-free mix of the legend from YouTube and applied that to everything we've done so far. Honestly, it's the least I could do. It is Undertale's 10th anniversary after all. Thanks again for watching this monumental video that took me 2 months to edit. I'm going to lie down now, so I will see you next time.